Good morning. We are going to go through chapters 12 and 13 today. They're shorter, so we're going to kind of condense them in. As of this point, you should have already finished the 9, 10, and 11 checkpoint quiz. If you have not done that, do not go on. You have to catch up with those quizzes. Those are the only way that I know that you're reading along with us. So they don't take long. You have the questions in advance to kind of prepare yourself for the multiple choice part. Please do that before you go on to chapter 12. So, there's only one vocabulary word I want to share with you today, and it's gnarled. So let me go ahead and share my screen with you. It's used here as an adjective describing the roots of a tree. So she remembered the terns, the twisted trees whose gnarled roots push the earth into knotted clumps. So when you see the word gnarled, sometimes you think of something very old. And so it's kind of, if you're using it to describe something on a person, like teeth or hands, it's not a complimentary thing. It means it's old and twisted and kind of yucky looking. Means rough and twisted, especially as a result of age. So if you could picture these roots of a tree, sometimes you see them sticking up and they're just kind of going everywhere and they look, I don't know, like old elephant trunks kind of things. So that's kind of a cool descriptive word to use to describe something. So let's go right into our sneak peek for next week, our story. So last left, we have poor Ellen, very frightened and afraid. All the Jewish people are congregating, and Peter Nielsen had just given some drops to the baby to help it sleep. And they're obviously going to try to get these people now safely over across the water to Sweden. Mr. Rosen tripped on the loose step outside the kitchen door. His wife grasped his arm and he regained his balance. So everyone keeps talking about that loose step. So we know that that is definitely relevant. It's come up like 3 different times. It is very dark, Mama whispered as they stood in the yard with their blankets and bundles of food gathered in their arms. And we can't use any kind of light. I'll go first. I know the way very well, and you follow me. Try not to stumble over the tree roots in the path. Feel carefully with your feet. The path is uneven. So Peter already took one group, and Mama's guiding another group through these woods, and certainly they can't use any sort of light because they don't want to be seen. And be very, very quiet, she added unnecessarily. The night was quiet too. A slight breeze moved in the tops of the trees, and from across the meadow came the sound of the sea's movement, which was a constant sound here and had always been. But no birds called or cried here now in the night. The cow sat silently in the barn, the kitten upstairs in Kirsty's arms. So just talking really about how still everything is. There were stars here and there, dotting the sky among thin clouds, but no moon. Anne-Marie shivered, standing at the foot of the steps, so another reference to stars. Come, Mama murmured, and she moved away from the house. One by one, the Rosens turned and hugged Anne-Marie silently. Ellen came to her last. The 2 girls held each other. I'll come back someday, Ellen whispered fiercely. I promise. I know you will, Anne-Marie whispered back, holding her friend tightly. Then they were gone, Mama and the Rosens. Anne-Marie was alone. She went into the house crying suddenly and closed the door against the night. Like what a nervous kind of feeling she must have. And almost also too like you can breathe a little bit now, but now she's worried for them. The lid off the casket was closed again. Now the room was empty. There was no sign of the people who had sat there for those hours. Anne-Marie wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She opened the dark curtains and the windows. She curled once more in the rocker, trying to relax. She traced their route in her mind. She knew the old path too, not as well as her mother, who had followed it almost every day of her childhood with her dog scampering behind. But Anne-Marie had often walked to town and back that way, and she remembered the turns, the twisted trees whose gnarled roots pushed the earth now and then into knotted clumps, and the thick bushes that often flowered in the early summer. She walked with them in her mind, feeling the way through the darkness. It would take them, she thought, half an hour to reach the place where Uncle Henrik was waiting with his boat. Mama would leave them there, pausing a minute, no more, for a final hug, and then she would turn and come home. It would be faster for Mama alone, with no need to wait as the Rosens, unfamiliar with the path, slowly felt their way along. Mama would hurry sure-footed now back to her children. The clock in the hall struck once. It was 2:30 in the morning. Her mother would be home in an hour, Anne-Marie decided. She rocked gently back and forth in the old chair. Mama would be home by 3:30. So this is the middle of the night, they're talking, 3:30 in the morning. She thought of Papa back in Copenhagen alone. He would be awake too. He'd be wishing he could have come, but knowing too that he must come and go as always, to the corner store for the newspaper, to his office when morning came. Now he would be afraid for them, and watching the clock, waiting for word that the Rosens were safe, that Mama and the girls were here in the farm, starting a new day with the sun shining through the kitchen window and cream on their oatmeal. So they're all taking a huge risk of retaliation from the Nazis if they get caught. Anne-Marie's family would be in big trouble too. It was harder for the ones who were waiting, Anne-Marie knew. Less danger, perhaps, but more fear. Was it harder for the ones who were waiting? I don't know. She yawned and her head nodded. She fell asleep, and it was a sleep as thin as night clouds, dotted with dreams that came and went like the stars. Stars again. Light woke her, but it was not really morning, not yet. It was only the first hint of a slightly lightening sky, a pale gleam at the edge of the meadow, a sign that far away somewhere to the east, where Sweden still slept, morning would be coming soon. Dawn would creep across the Swedish farmland and coast, then it would wash little Denmark with light and move across the North Sea to wake Norway. Anne-Marie blinked in confusion, sitting up, remembering after a moment where she was and why. But it was not right. The pale light at the horizon, it should be dark still. It should be night. She stood stiffly, stretching her legs, and went to the hall to look at the clock. It was past 4 o'clock. Remember, she assumed Mama would be home by 3:30 at the latest. Where was Mama? Perhaps she had come home not wanting to wake Anne-Marie and had gone to bed herself. Surely that was it. Mama must have been exhausted. She must have been up all night, had made the dangerous journey to the boat and returned through the dark woods, wanting only to sleep. Anne-Marie went up the narrow staircase. The door to the bedroom where she had slept with Ellen was open. The 2 small beds were neatly made, covered with the old quilts, and empty. Beside it, Uncle Henrik's door was open too, and his bed too was unused and empty. Despite her worry, Anne-Marie smiled slightly when she saw some of Henrik's clothes crumpled in a chair and a pair of shoes caked with barnyard dirt lying on the floor. He needs a wife, she said to herself, imitating Mama. The door to the other bedroom, the one where Kirsty and Mama were sharing, was closed. Quietly, not wanting to wake them, Anne-Marie pushed it open. The kitten's ears moved, standing up straight. Its eyes opened wide, and it raised its head and yawned. It pried itself out of Kirsty's arms, stretched, and then jumped lightly to the floor and came to Anne-Marie. It rubbed itself against her leg and purred. Kirsty sighed and turned in her sleep. One arm, free now of the kitten's warmth and comfort, dug itself in across a pillow. There was no one else in the wide bed. Anne-Marie moved quickly to the window, which overlooked the clearing that led to the path's entrance. The light outside was still very dim, and she peered through the dimness, trying to see, looking for the opening in the trees where the path began, looking for Mama hurrying home. After a second, she saw a shape there, something unfamiliar, something that had not been there the day before. A dark shape, no, more than a blurred heap at the beginning of the path. Anne-Marie squinted, forcing her eyes to understand, needing to understand, not wanting to understand. The shape moved, and she knew why. It was her mother lying on the earth. Chapter 13. Run as fast as you can. Still moving quietly so as not to wake her sister, Anne-Marie sped down the stairs and through the kitchen door. Her foot caught the loose step, and she faltered for a moment, righting herself, then dashed across the ground to the place where her mother lay. Sorry, I had to go. Chapter 13. Run as fast as you can. Still moving quietly so as not to wake her sister, Anne-Marie sped down the stairs and through the kitchen door. Her foot caught the loose step, and she faltered for a moment, righting herself, then dashed across the ground to the place where her mother lay. "Mama," she called desperately. "Mama." "Shh," Mama said, raising her head. "I'm all right." "But Mama," Anne-Marie asked, kneeling beside her, "what's wrong? What happened?" Her mother pulled herself into a sitting position. She winced in pain. "I'm all right, really, don't worry. And the Rosens are with Henrik. That's the important thing." She smiled a little, though her face was drawn with pain, and she bit her lip, the smile fading. "We got there quite quickly, even though it was still so dark, and it was difficult for the Rosens, not knowing the path. Henrik was there waiting on the boat, and he took them aboard and down below so quickly to the cabin where they were invisible in an instant. He said the others were already there. Peter got him there safely too. So I turned and hurried home. I was so anxious to get back to you girls. I should have been more careful." Talking softly, she brushed some grass and dirt from her hands. "Can you believe it? I was nearly here. Well, maybe just halfway when I tripped over a root and went sprawling." Mama sighed. "So clumsy," she said, as if she were scolding herself. "I'm afraid my ankle is broken, Anne-Marie. Thank goodness it is nothing worse. An ankle mends. And I am home and the Rosens are with Henrik." "You should have seen me, Anne-Marie," she said, shaking her head with a wry look. "Your proper mama crawling inch by inch. I probably look like a drunkard." She reached for Anne-Marie's arm. "Here, let me lean on you. I think if you support me on this side, I can make my way up to the house." "Goodness, what a clumsy fool I am. Here, let me put my arm over your shoulders. You're such a good, strong, brave girl. Now, very slowly. There." Mama's face was white with pain. Anne-Marie could see it even though the faint light of the approaching dawn. She hobbled, leaning heavily on her daughter, pausing again and again toward the house. "When we get inside, I'll have a cup of tea, and then we'll call the doctor. I'll tell him that I fell on the stairs. You have to help me wash the grass and the twigs. Here, Anne-Marie, let me rest for a minute." They had reached the house, and Mama sank down to the steps and sat. She took several deep breaths. Anne-Marie sat beside her and held her hand. "Mama, I was so worried when you didn't come back." Mama nodded. I knew you would be. I thought of you worrying as I dragged myself along. But here I am, safe with you now. Everything is fine. What time is it?" "It must be close to 4:30, or must be 4:30 or close to it." "They will sail soon." Mama turned her head and gazed across the meadow to the sea and the vast sky above it. There were no stars now. Stars? Only the gray pale sky with pinkness at its border. Soon they will be safe too. And think about how much pain Mama must be in with a broken ankle dragging herself in the night, but she's putting on a good front to make Anne-Marie not scared or nervous. Anne-Marie relaxed. Excuse me. She stroked her mother's hand and looked down at the discolored, swollen ankle. "Mama, what is it?" she asked suddenly, reaching into the grass at the foot of the steps. Mama looked. She gasped. "Oh my God," she said. Anne-Marie picked it up. She recognized it now, knew what it was. It was the packet that Peter had given to Mr. Rosen. "Mr. Rosen tripped on the step, remember? It must have fallen from his pocket. We'll have to save it and give it back to Peter." Anne-Marie handed it to her mother. "Do you know what it is?" Her mother didn't answer. Her face was stricken. She looked at the path and down at her ankle. "It's important, isn't it, Mama? It was for Uncle Henrik. I remember Peter said it was very important. I heard him tell Mr. Rosen." Her mother tried to stand but fell back against the steps with a groan. "My God," she murmured, "it may all have been for nothing." Anne-Marie took the packet from her mother's hand and stood. "I will take it," she said. "I know the way, and it's almost light now. I can run like the wind." Mama spoke very quickly, her voice tense. "Anne-Marie, go into the house and get a small basket on the table. Quickly, quickly. Put an apple into it and some cheese. Put this packet underneath. Do you understand? Hurry." Anne-Marie did instantly as she was told. The basket, the packet at the bottom. She covered it with the napkin, then some wrapped cheese, an apple. She glanced around the kitchen, saw some bread, and added that. The basket was full. She took it to where her mother was. "You must run to the boat. If anyone should stop you—" "Who would stop me?" "Anne-Marie, you understand how dangerous this is. If any soldiers see you, if they stop you, you must pretend to be nothing more than a little girl, a silly, empty-headed little girl taking lunch to a fisherman, a foolish uncle who forgot his bread and cheese." "Mama, what is it in the bottom?" But her mother still didn't answer the question. "Go," she said, "go. Go right now and run as fast as you can." Anne-Marie kissed her mother quickly, grabbed the basket from her mother's lap, turned, and ran toward the path. Whew, whatever is in that envelope is something Henrik needs to get them safely across. So now Anne-Marie is on this mission. So we are building towards a climax. Again, a lot of reference to bravery, and now Anne-Marie has to be brave. They talked a lot about not knowing what, and that makes it easier to be brave. So she doesn't know what's in this envelope that's in the bottom of this basket now. So all that is playing in with the bravery as well. So we're building up to the moment where she has to be the bravest, and that will be our climax in this story. All right, so have a wonderful rest of the day, and I will see you back here tomorrow.